Just a whole host of green across that market board, and that's the sentiment we're getting as well today. Then let's chat to Maudi Lentsoane, who's from Lehumo Capital, who joins us now here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Maudi, thank you so much for the time. Flirting above that 59,000 point mark, good positivity coming through to the market. Not necessarily our own doing, really, is it?
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it in your opening that lots of central banks having meetings, and I think the statement's quite clear. The message is quite clear. Is that, of course, confirming what the IMF already indicated beginning of this year, that we've got an economy, global economy that's facing some difficulties, and the recent developments around, the trade war also not helping, I think, making that situation even worse. So all the central banks are, indicating that, of course, they are going to be taking a loose monetary policy going forward. Cutting rates. Already Jerome Powell last night indicating that it is a high possibility given those weaknesses that we've seen. So definitely not surprising that we are seeing that kind of performance on the equity markets across the globe. It's in response to that loose monetary policy that could be looming.
Yeah. What does that mean then for South Africa as well then? And I ask in the context of saying if the US says they're going to cut interest rates at a later stage, it obviously does give us some sort of room. But at the same time, we had inflation coming in at 4.5% yesterday, and that means that the trajectory for where inflation goes is perhaps a little lower than the Reserve Bank would have expected. And the rand now doing better at 14.22 against the US dollar, a whole 5.5% better than 2 weeks ago, rather about 3 weeks ago. So surely there's some sentiment here on cutting as well locally.
No, certainly. I think, especially considering just how weak our economy is. I've always been of the view that, and this is despite all these recent, rhetorics by some politicians. I think I'm of the very strong view that politicians should stay away from, the Reserve Bank or the monetary policies. They should rather focus on the fiscal policy, which is what they really mandated to do and do it well. But I think at this point, the Reserve Bank really does need to also come to the party and really play that stimulus, role that they need to play. Already the developed worlds are moving in that direction. They are helping their own economy and responding to the circumstances that they find themselves in. And I think the Reserve Bank here locally also need to come in and play that role. I think they've got a room. I mean, we've been within the target for a very long time. Yes, they're focusing on that midpoint. I think even the midpoint, we have been around that level for a long time. Yeah. I think it is a fair call and expectations to say perhaps they need to come in and begin to look at maybe cutting interest rates to try and really boost and support this economy, which is in so much difficult position at this stage.
Yeah. Does the rand stay there after President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech, or what would we need to hear from him with regards to the state of the nation later today to keep the rand there and hopefully even go lower than 14 rand even?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be a very difficult one for the rand to remain at this level, just given the challenges that the president faces. I mean, there's just so much. There's a plethora of bad things that needs to be addressed. I'm talking here the situations at Eskom. The state-owned enterprise companies as well, in a very difficult position that immediately needs the government to come in and really assist. And of course, that will definitely be rating negative. We've already had the statements coming from the likes of Moody's that the GDP figures that we had in the first quarter are definitely rating negative. So I think, it's going to be a very difficult one. I think the rand will come under a lot of pressure, and especially if we start talking also the Reserve Bank coming in and cutting interest rates. I think we are leaning more towards or skewed towards the weaknesses in the rand in the near future.
Yeah. What are your expectations then out of that State of the Nation address? What is the one thing you'd like President Cyril Ramaphosa to at least address?
Look, I think he needs to clarify, particularly regarding the issues of Eskom. He did indicate a couple of months ago when he had delivered the State of the Nation address that they want to break it down into three parts. We don't have the details of how that is going to work, the funding model that is going to work there. I think he needs to come up with clear, a message in how the government plan on doing that. And of course, the crisis that they currently have which is a massive debt that they have. How are they going to address those challenges as well? And of course, the number of other challenges with the other state-owned enterprises as well. You've got SAA, you've got SABC. I think there's just so many challenges that he needs to come and really be clear on. I haven't even mentioned the other policy uncertainty, whether it be the mining, charter, the land, policy as well. We need to really get a clear message in terms of how the country is going to move forward.
Yeah. Anything in terms of equities that you're perhaps looking at? And I say that just in the context of a market that is seemingly headed in one direction. You have no real message out of the likes of Naspers, which are, of course, the big fish, the likes of BHP Group as well. Not necessarily going anywhere with regards to their trading in Australia and locally as well. You have the likes of the retailers going up today, even some of the miners as well. Is there any particular space that you're perhaps looking at right now?
Yeah, look, I think you've seen the reactions overnight in terms of what we're seeing. We are seeing those interest rates sensitive counters really performing very well. And I think that's likely to be, the move going forward, to see that with the loose monetary policy that is likely to be adopted by the central banks across the globe, that you are going to begin to see some of those counters, the financial sectors, the retail sectors, begin to really improve. And also the support that the weaker dollar, for example, it will have for the resources sector, that could also provide a little bit of a buffer for those sectors. But it's very difficult to try and pinpoint one sector in particular, given these uncertainties that I've just mentioned. I mean, from the trade war, and also just coming back into the fact that we've got the economy that's just not growing. It's a very difficult one to really make a call on in terms of which sectors in particular.
Stick to what you know, maybe. That might just be the one thing, and stick to what has always worked for you for so long. Thank you so much for the time, Maudi Lentsoane there from Lehumo Capital, unpacking that market picture then for us. Just over 0.7% higher for the JSE All Share, above that 59,000 point mark. So quite key and quite critical in surpassing that point as well. The Rand doing a whole lot better, a whole host of green across the board. General positivity, but does it last until the end of the day? One can only find out a little bit later. For me, that's where the buck stops. It's back to Nzinga in studio right after the short break.